This is Jason Beaver, and I would like to thank you for taking the time today to review my preliminary defense presentation. The title of my dissertation in practice is No Longer Experts: The Experiences of Physician Assistants Transitioning to Instructional Roles. I would like to share with you the purpose, background, methodology, and other aspects of my study, as well as discuss its relevance for physician assistant or PA programs. My study focuses on the transition of PAs from clinical practice to instructional roles. Lee and colleagues found that nearly all medical educators were not prepared formally for the new academic roles in research or as a teacher, which can culminate in these practitioners struggling due to the vast contrast between practicing clinically and participating in academia. This lack of preparation can be challenging for these clinicians assuming their new instructional role with responsibilities such as teaching and student advising. The purpose of this dissertation is first to explore the experiences of physician assistant educators who transitioned from clinical practice to instructional roles in PA programs. As Skies and colleagues indicate, a transition for a new educator from clinical practice can often be a challenge and result in being overwhelmed. I will also seek to bring awareness to the challenges faced and offer recommendations to improve this transitional process. This is important as Ruiz and Gonzalez determined that further study seems warranted, as there has been minimal examination of experienced clinicians transitioning to the academic setting. I would like to provide further context for my problem of practice by sharing findings related to the challenges that these PA educators face as they transition from clinical practice. Brown and Sorrell explained that the divide between understanding the struggles new medical educators face and the necessary solutions has not been bridged, even though this is not a new issue. Throughout the course of my literature review, I identified 4 recurring challenges that PA educators can often face during their transition. First, there is a lack of previous pedagogy training for these clinicians, as they are primarily trained to diagnose and manage their patients' medical conditions. Grassley and colleagues described that formal teacher preparation while in a graduate program is a rarity for clinicians transitioning to academia. Secondly, it was noted that there were deficiencies in the translation of clinical skill and experience to a new role, which Hatim and colleagues pointed out that it is not sufficient to suggest that skill as a clinical practitioner translates to teaching abilities. Thirdly, there is a lack of orientation received in support of PAs transitioning into instructional roles, as Cox and colleagues explained, by stating faculty orientations for medical educators may be less extensive and successful than desired. Finally, my literature review would show that there was an uncertainty of teaching, advising, and organizational structure for these new PA educators. Mann and DeGagny, as well as Murray and colleagues, expressed that proper skills, role expectations, and obligations new faculty will encounter in this role must be recognized, but discerning the culture of academia can be a struggle for transitioners. Based on my problem of practice and the background information, I developed 2 research questions to explore. They are, number 1, how do physician assistant educators describe their experiences transitioning from clinical practice to faculty teaching roles? And number 2, how do physician assistant educators perceive their clinical experience and initial training prepared them to assume a faculty teaching role? In order to evaluate my research questions, I will use an exploratory qualitative approach, which, as Flick and Stevens would explain, seeks to describe the lived experiences of those involved from their own perspectives and at a greater depth. Schlossberg's transition theory will be the basis for my theoretical framework, which Anderson and colleagues specify that people move in, through, and out of transitions where they must learn new roles, responsibilities, and expectations. The authors also explain that an orientation is needed to help individuals understand what is expected. The transition of PAs from clinical practice to instructional roles provides an illustration for this theory. For the purpose of selecting a study sample, I will use purposeful sampling of 15 to 20 PA educators. The qualifying criteria for the participants were designed to resemble the organization and structure of the Florida State University School of Physician Assistant Practice, which is the intended benefactor. The criteria for participation will be, number one, having transitioned from clinical practice within the last 5 years. Number two, currently employed full-time in a PA program within the U.S. Number three, at a 4-year university, which also has a College of Medicine. And number four, has a primary responsibility as a faculty didactic instructor. I will collect my data through semi-structured virtual interviews. Lasting approximately 30 to 45 minutes, I will use interview questions covering 3 general areas of interest, which aligns with my theoretical framework of Schlossberg's transition theory. The areas covered will be in regard to motivation and preparation for transitioning into a PA instructional role, experiences and challenges related to the transition, and recommendations for future transitioners. The analytic approach I will take will be multiple cycles of coding, with the first cycle combining both deductive codes using provisional codes based on Schlossberg's transitional theory, as well as inductively using in vivo coding to capture the participants' actual words. This will be followed by a second cycle of coding using pattern coding in order to combine the first cycle constructs into consolidated categories and themes, as was suggested by Saldenia. I additionally will use concept mapping to help guide this analytic approach. As with many studies, there are limitations which have been identified in my study. First, there is a potential bias, as I am a PA educator who will interview fellow PA educators, in which bias may be present. I will address these concerns through thick, rich description, member checking, and through the use of a research journal. Additionally, there will be a limited application of findings, as conducting this same study with a different set of participants could lead to a different conclusion, which is acceptable to me, as my desire is for the findings to improve the transitional process for new PA faculty at the Florida State University School of Physician Assistant Practice. As I conclude this presentation, I would like to summarize my summary as a pursuit to bring awareness to the challenges PAs face in transitioning from clinical practice to an instructional role. My hope is that the findings of this study will contribute to improving the transitional process for PA educators. I want to thank you for taking the time today to view this presentation, and I look forward to our discussion and answering any questions you may have during my preliminary defense on Thursday, April 3rd, 2025.